On a recent episode of the show, we talked about the individual expectations for each member of the Flyville 23 high school recruiting class. Well, on today's episode of the show, we are talking about the expectations for each individual incoming transfer ahead of next season. With that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your 2023 goals. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. As always, want to say thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I mentioned in the opener a couple episodes ago, we talked about the individual expectations for each Flyville 23 member in the high school class. Now we're going to talk about the transfers, diving into what the expectations should be for each incoming football transfer next fall. We'll start out offensively. We'll basically break it down into 3 segments. There are 12 incoming transfers at this point in time. So we'll talk about 4 transfers in each segment. Beginning in the first segment, it's quarterback Jack Plummer, wide receivers Kevin Coleman Jr. and Jamari Thrash. And then we will also talk about running back Isaac Guerendo. So beginning, I guess I will start with this. I think that Louisville has done a really good job overall, really filling the needs that they had to address beginning really after the season. You know, Jeff Brom and company came in very late, early December speaking, but they did a great job. They got a grad transfer quarterback. They revamped the wide receiver room. They got some depth at the running back position. They got depth at offensive line, and then multiple standouts on the defensive side of the ball. Well, we'll talk about the offensive side of the ball for the first segment, beginning with the grad transfer quarterback Jack Plummer from California. Last season had 21 touchdowns, 9 interceptions to go along with 3,095 yards. The 6'5" senior from Gilbert, Arizona, actually played in Jeff Brom's system back in Purdue, spent 3 years with the Boilermakers beginning in 2019, had 1,600 yards as a freshman in 2019, and then suffered some injury issues throughout the next couple seasons that saw Aiden O'Connell rise to the starting quarterback of Purdue, and the rest was history. So Plummer transfers out, goes to California, has a solid season with an offense that's really not all that good. All bad offensive line play, but he holds his own. You know, he shows grit and determination and has a respectable season. Respectable enough that leads Jeff Brom to call him up and basically say, hey, how would you like to play your last season in the ACC? And I think that this is a good partnership between both parties. For Plummer, it's now you're going to an offense that you're familiar with some solid skill players and a pretty solid offensive line in a conference and a schedule that has the opportunity to allow you to win big time in 2023. And then for Louisville, obviously, well, you needed a grad transfer to sort of be the bridge between Malik Cunningham and Pierce Clarkson. I don't think Brock Doman is the guy for the future. I guess stranger things have happened, but from what I've seen from Doman, I just don't necessarily believe that, he is the guy for the future. So I think that, bringing in a grad transfer quarterback is the right decision. I think the expectations for this coming year for Plummer in the Louisville system, obviously very pass friendly. There's a lot of weapons in the skill positions. So I think for Jack Plummer, I think you're looking for continued increase in yardage, probably a better TD to INT ratio, better quarterback rating. Overall, I think that this is going to be an instance to where I would like to see what he can do in a clean pocket. This is going to be an interesting season because of what he has shown last year and what he was able to do at California. Played really, really well against UCLA and USC, who are some very, very solid teams. But I think you're going to see him in a situation where he's going to kind of continue what he did last season. You're going to see a player that probably will increase his yardage. I'd like to see a little bit less turnovers in terms of interceptions, a little bit better accuracy, but overall, solid addition that I think is going to be a very, very good quarterback that should be a seamless transition considering that he already knows the offense right away. So I look for Jack Plummer to have a ton of success right away. Another player to have immediate success, Jamari Thrash, the transfer from Georgia State, was an all Sun Belt selection, best wide receiver in the Sun Belt, according to many people. Last year, led the conference in receiving yards. He had 61 catches, 1,122 yards to go with 7 touchdowns, averaged 18.4 yards per reception. The 6-foot receiver from LaGrange, Georgia, was 13th in the country in total receiving yards last season. Absolutely dynamic. I think you're going to see an instance to where Thrash sort of has a Tyler Hudson-esque level of production for the season. Hudson, the 7th 1,000-yard receiver in program history. I know that when it comes to determining what is going to happen in the wide receiver room in terms of statistical production, it's hard to really tell because of how many players that there are competing for targets, so on and so forth. But I think that Thrash is going to be a player that has an immediate impact right away. I think he's going to be a possible all-ACC level caliber player, a guy that opposing defenses are going to struggle to defend in single coverage, ranked, I think, by Pro Football Focus or The Athletic, one of those publications. He was a top 25, inside the top 25 and returning wide receivers in the country, which is huge news considering some of the guys on that list. So I look for Jamari Thrash to have a huge season next year. You're probably going to see him play his way onto more NFL draft big boards, into more NFL draft mock drafts, so on and so forth. But I have very, very high hopes for this player. I think that Thrash is one of those guys that when Louisville got his commitment, I was like, oh, this is a game changer. He's immediately going to start this upcoming season. I know that there is certain level of concern, with players in general going from, mid-major or FCS to Power 5 level play. But I really do think that, we're going to see him in a role like Tyler Hudson, to where he's going to be entrusted with a ton of responsibility early on, and I think he's going to rise to the occasion. Moving on, another player that's going to see a ton of production right away, that is Jackson State transfer Kevin Coleman Jr. The freshman last season had 510 receiving yards, 33 receptions for 3 touchdowns for Coach Deion Sanders, averaged 15.5 yards per reception. Played with Shedeur Sanders, a very, very solid quarterback that is now at Colorado, a guy that was ranked as a top 60 recruit in his respective recruiting class. I think that you're going to see him utilized a ton in the slot. Thrash, I would assume, is going to be playing a little bit more out wide. You'll see guys kind of rotate in and out. Coleman Jr., extremely explosive, makes the loss of DeAndre Moore, takes away a little bit more of that sting that came with the loss of DeAndre Moore to Texas. So I think he's going to be incorporated in the offensive plans immediately. A guy that is extremely explosive when he gets his hands on the football, a solid deep threat as well. That's something to look forward to. It's going to be interesting to see how Jeff Brom kind of schemes up both Amari Huggins-Bruce and Kevin Coleman Jr. on the field at the same time, because you would assume that both of them are going to see a ton of playing time right away. So I think Kevin Coleman Jr., although he might not necessarily be a 1,000-yard receiver this upcoming season, I think it wouldn't surprise me to see a statistical jump, but also, seeing his name on the map a little bit more with him, now being on the Power 5 level. So moving right on along into the final transfer of the segment, that is Wisconsin running back Isaac Guerendo. unlike the other three, is probably more of a depth move. Obviously, Tyon Evans, Travion Cooley, Jalen Mitchell no longer with the program. So the returning players were Jawar Jordan and Maurice Turner. You got Kejuan Brown in the 5'23 class, but it didn't stop the Cardinals from going out and continuing to address depth in the transfer portal. Isaac Guerendo, 64 carries, 385 yards, 5 touchdowns this past season. For the Badgers, the senior from Clayton, Indiana, averaged 6 yards per carry, 6 foot, 223 pounds. So unlike Jordan, Turner, more of a power back, going to be utilized as maybe a change of pace player, more so at the goal line, a situational possibility. So I think that Isaac Guerendo is probably going to compete for starter level, snaps, but I think Jawar Jordan is ultimately the starter in 2023. So, really kind of makes you wonder at this point what it's going to look like in terms of the deviation of carries in the running back room. But I think that we're going to see Isaac Guerendo definitely have some moments this fall to where he's making some big time runs because he is has deceptive speed for his size. So let's now head on into the second segment, talking about 4 more transfers. Yep, it's just a show dedicated to the transfer portal. We're going to talk about wide receivers Jadon Thompson and Jimmy Calloway to go along with offensive lineman Paul Flores and safety/outside linebacker Gilbert Frierson. We'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools that go beyond the resume data by using insights from your job post company and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball all in one place, plus hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, moving right on along, talking about 4 more transfers. Jadon Thompson, Jimmy Calloway, Paul Flores, and Gilbert Frierson, 3 offensive players, and then we'll start to get into the defensive side of the ball at the end of this segment. We'll start with Jadon Thompson. A couple players transferred from Louisville to Cincinnati, Dorian Jones, Luke Kandra, but there was a player that transferred the opposite way, Cincinnati to Louisville. That's Jadon Thompson, 6'2" receiver from the Chicago area, a junior that had 27 catches, 393 yards, and 1 touchdown this past season, 14.6 yards per reception. Also was a big player in special teams, returned a couple of kicks for touchdowns this past year. With each and every season, Thompson has gotten better and better, more production, only at 58 yards as a freshman, 208 yards the next season. Career year highs in receptions, yards, touchdowns, so on and so forth. So I think that Jadon Thompson is a guy that is going to be utilized probably as a depth piece right away. I'm not saying that he can't start. I do think that he is a player that is going to be in a spot to where he's in a depth chart with Jamari Thrash, Amari Huggins-Bruce, Kevin Coleman Jr., a little bit more size. So maybe he's used more, out wide as a wide out, but ultimately I think that you're going to see Thompson in a position where he's probably going to be in the 2 deep, some valuable depth right away. Whether or not he's going to be a starter, I think that that's yet to be seen. It really just kind of depends on how things go in spring ball, heading into fall camp, so on and so forth. I think that he definitely has the talent, but ultimately probably a player that's going to start out as a depth piece. And very, very solid problem to have if you're Jeff Brom and company, to have a guy that had over almost 400 receiving yards this past season, now in an offense that's being looked at as a depth piece. I think you're going to see him in a situation to where he's going to contribute. Just because I'm saying he's going to be a depth piece doesn't mean he's not going to contribute. I definitely think he's going to contribute. But ultimately, I think that, Huggins, Bruce, Thrash, and Kevin Coleman Jr. are probably going to be top three in the targets share. Another player that's going to look to create his legacy here at Louisville, Jimmy Calloway, had 2 receptions for 20 yards this past season. A guy that I believe there was a suspension early on in the season, a player that a lot of people raved about in the offseason, but for one reason or another, didn't necessarily see the field a ton this past season for the Vols. 6-foot receiver from Morrow, Georgia. Very, very talented. I think that that's what you hear when you see his name, is that, it's all about, maybe a change of scenery is for the best, but he's a very, very talented receiver. So I caution Louisville fans to look at the statistical production from this past season and believe that, he's not going to see the field at all. Because I don't think that's the truth. I think that Jimmy Calloway is a player that, was in line to play a ton alongside of Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, so on and so forth. So I think that you're going to see Jimmy Calloway sort of in the same position that Jadon Thompson is in. He's going to be in a position to where he's trying to show out and compete to where he gets those production, we gets those target that leads to good production. So, I think that that's the one side of, Jeff Brom addressing this wide receiver room, is that, yes, he addressed depth. He added, more pieces to the mix. He added starter level players. But also you have to know that not every player in this offense is going to get 8 to 10 carries or 8 to 10 targets per game, I should say. I apologize. So you have to understand that there are a lot of mouths to feed in the skill positions here for Louisville. I can see Jawar Jordan and Maurice Turner and Isaac Guerendo seeing some, shares of those targets. Jamari Johnson, maybe a tight end transfer if they go after one. But ultimately, Jimmy Calloway, very talented, probably just going to have to compete as depth early on and possibly, who knows, maybe ending up as a starter later on in the season. John Paul Flores, offensive lineman for Virginia, an all Ivy League level standout over the past couple of seasons before transferring to Virginia last year, to where he was a part of a very abysmal offensive line, but was one of the bright spots in that unit, played pretty much every position. I think he's probably going to start at guard for the Cardinals, getting that depth right away. I think he's going to be a starting level player, having that experience, especially from the Power 5, solid in run blocking and in pass pro as well. I think that this is going to be an instance to where the 6'5", 300-pound offensive lineman is going to be a guy that you look at and think that, well, maybe he doesn't make the biggest impact because he's an offensive lineman, but I would argue that maybe it is as big of an impact as any, because, you're losing a lot. You're losing Caleb Chandler. You're losing Luke Kandra. You're losing Trevor Reed. You're losing Adonis Boone. You're losing a lot of guys on this offensive line that you have to now begin to address moving forward. And I think that the Cardinals, I'm not necessarily concerned that they're going to do so, but I don't think that Madden Sanker is going to be a guy that's going to start right away. Austin Collins is projected as the other starter at guard, and he's a guy that's been a rotational piece. So John Paul Flores is a guy that's going to start right away, I would assume, at guard, but if there are some injuries, don't be surprised to see him move over one way or the other to tackle, to center, so be it. So I think that we're going to see him in a situation where he's going to be a very, very valuable tool on that offensive line, sort of like Cam DeGeorge was, the UConn transfer from a couple years ago. Moving right on along into talking about the last transfer of this segment, that is Gilbert Frierson from Miami. Miles Slusher committed to Louisville and then ultimately flipped to Colorado. and Frierson is entered into the mix. Frierson is a very interesting situation because he only had 3 tackles this past season, but a lot of people believe that he just didn't fit the defense that Mario Cristobal ran. Has over 100 tackles to his name. Defensive back is what he's listed as, the 6'1", 210-pound native of Coconut Grove, Florida, but more so projects as kind of a hybrid linebacker, slot cornerback / safety that is utilized in a variety of different ways. We talked about that versatility when we talked about Damani Maxon, the 4-star safety from the Houston area, in a previous episode. But I think that Gilbert Frierson is going to be used as a player that is kind of utilized as a hybrid. Whether or not he's going to start right away or not, I'm not sure. I think he's probably going to be competing with possibly Ben Perry for starting minutes, for starting snaps. Not necessarily sure there, but at the very least, he's going to be a depth piece moving forward. So extremely excited to see what he can bring to the table, but ultimately over 100 tackles at the ACC level. Very hard-hitting defensive back. He utilizes his size. Very, very solid of, utilizing that strength and athleticism as well. For being 6'1", 210 pounds, moves well for his size. So extremely excited to see, what he's going to be able to do moving forward in this Louisville defense that's led by Mark Hagan and Ron English. So with that being said, the next 4, or the final 4, I should say, Stephen Herron, Marquis Groves-Killebrew, Rodney McGraw, and Devin Neal. We'll talk about those 4 here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and calories, you have to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. I know that my goal has been to eat a little healthier this year, but if you're like me where you want to just eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then I've got the thing for you. Built is the way to go. Has all of the healthy components of a protein bar, but covered in 100% real chocolate, so it tastes just like a candy bar. Maybe even better. They have a wide variety of flavors from churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, and more. Usually you've had to get them at built.com, which you still can, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section. Grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. But if you're a Sam's Club person, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. That's built.com. All right, final segment of the show, the final 4 transfers that we'll talk about in terms of individual expectations this season. We'll begin with the Louisville Cardinal native, Stephen Herron. He's from New Albany, starred at Trinity High School this past season for Stanford, played 4 years at Stanford, 37 total tackles, had 5.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, probably going to be the direct replacement for either Yasir Abdullah or Yaya Diaby. I would imagine that he starts right away. That's probably the selling factor for Brian Brom is, hey, why don't you come home and start right away for, your program that you grew up around, and you'll possibly win a good amount of games. It depends on what he is projected as. He's 6'3", 237 pounds. Is he going to be more of an outside linebacker, or is he a traditional defensive end? That is the question. But regardless, he's going to be utilized one way or the other. So I think that you're going to see him start right away for the Cardinals, possibly be an all ACC caliber player. Is he going to be as good as Yaya Diaby was? Well, that is still to be seen. I'm not necessarily sure there, but at the end of the day, a player that is a very, very solid replacement, for Yaya Diaby. So extremely excited to see what he's going to be able to do, so on and so forth. All right, let's see. Moving right on along. Rodney McGraw, next up, the edge rusher from Penn State. Didn't necessarily get a lot of playing time this past season for the Nittany Lions. Probably a prospect for the future here for the Cardinals. Only had 1 total tackle this past season as a freshman. Probably a player that is going to be geared in towards the future. 6'5" native of Chicago, Illinois, 267-pound defensive end. I'm not necessarily sure if he's going to be utilized on the interior or on the edge, but I think that he could be a possible replacement for Ashton Gelati or Stephen Herron next season if things go right in his development. But I think that he's going to be a depth piece this upcoming year to where you're going to see him in situations, possible situations. But ultimately, at this point in time, I think that it would be hard to believe that he will be more than anything but a depth piece this upcoming season. A player that could possibly start, I would probably venture in saying that he's going to start this season, Marquis Groves-Killebrew, 6 foot, 180-pound defensive back. He's played his high school ball at Kennesaw, Georgia, but from the Louisville area. So another player coming home for Jeff Brom. I think that, you talk to a lot of people from Texas A&M, and they basically told you that, hey, look, he was a guy that a lot of people thought was going to play right away as a sophomore or as a true sophomore. Had some injury issues this past season. So a guy that's, it's hard to really judge a lot based on as a true freshman, but a top prospect in the class previous, as a true freshman for Texas A&M, had some injury issues, but looked solid at the end of the season, was projected as a starter for the Aggies. Now he comes home and is going to be a projected starter for the Cardinals. So another defensive transfer that is looking to start right away. Devin Neal from Baylor this past season, 41 tackles, 2 interceptions in 11 contests for the Baylor Bears, listed as a safety, a very solid defender this past year for Dave Aranda's defense. Had 31 solo tackles. Overall, is a guy that very solid in Big 12 play. I would assume that he is going to be a player that is going to compete with MJ Griffin and Josh Meekins Jr. in the back half of that secondary for possible starting level snaps. But I think at the very least he's going to be involved in the 2 deep, which is extremely encouraging because one of the issues over the past couple seasons for the Louisville Cardinals, there's been a revolving door at safety. So having that quality depth at safety is something that Louisville has desperately needed, and now they have, whether it's Minkin starting, which I would assume it probably is, or if it's Devin Neal starting, or if they continue to rotate. Like I said, in a 4-2-5 based defense, defensive backs are going to have to utilize versatility, and having multiple defensive backs that can play multiple positions is huge for the Cardinals. So I'm sorry if that was a little off the rails in terms of the format, but all 12 transfers look to make some sort of a contribution this season, some more than others. A handful of players looking to come in and start right away. Some are going to be depth pieces. I don't necessarily think that there's going to be any possible redshirt candidates, but ultimately, very, very solid job by Jeff Brom and company in the transfer portal. But that's going to wrap up this episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here very soon.